Yeah, but you
wanna do
can't,
that,
you
but-
have to try it. I mean, you only go around once. I'm more aware of that than I used to be.
Yeah.
Kind of liberating in a way because you know you're on the clock.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you can deceive yourself. Oh, I'll make it to 90. My parents made it to their late 80s,
Right.
and they were chain smokers, you know, and ate badly.
So, all right, let's get this started. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Help Me Understand with Dr. Thomas Jeffrey. Today, my guest is Dr. Russell Barclay. Dr. Barclay is a retired professor, twice over, I believe, of public relations and has over 35 years of experience as an educator. Prior to his stint in academia, Dr. Barclay worked as an independent communications counselor to public, private, and governmental organizations. In addition to all he has accomplished as a professional, he also found time to volunteer his services to many nonprofit organizations, all of which was recognized in 2012 when he was inducted into the Landmarks Hall of Fame in Louisville, Kentucky. I know Dr. Barclay best as a colleague with great stories and an amazing wit. Well, that and an Elvis shrine. I've asked him to join me today to help me understand comedy in society, precisely because I've always appreciated his ability to use words and ideas in quick, amusing ways. Thank you for being with me today.
It's my pleasure.
Appreciate it. So, I know that you did a lot of things, but you weren't a stand-up comedian.
No. Well, I taught for, as I say, about 38 years. So.
Right. So it came in handy then to every once in a while get your students' attention, huh?
They seem to pay attention. It's important, especially in the age of, slides and stuff like that you can do. It's important to mix them up with humorous slides so that the students don't fall asleep because Lord knows I put a lot of students to sleep. Our little heads bouncing like ping pong balls. It was just sad.
That's when you knew it was time to
That's when
do a little dance, do a little show.
Let me just shuttle here. I'd like to cover a tune. That's what you do.
So, what are your favorite forms of comedy? Like slapstick? Are you a Marx Brothers fan?
Well, the Marx Brothers were good writers, or he was anyway, a good writer as well as a comedian. Benny Hill is enjoyable to watch because it's absolutely senseless. There's just silliness on there. But a lot of, Noel Coward, and certainly Woody Allen. Even his books are funny.
Yeah.
His famous graduation speech at Hofstra, I think, was pretty clever.
Well, and that's one of the things I think that I prefer my comedy dry and with a twist. And so I think that's one of the things that I always appreciated about you. And sometimes it was so far over my head, I had to go look up some of these, these philosophers that you threw in there. And I was like, okay, I've got to do some research on
I'll
this.
try not to do that anymore. But of course, you saw or probably read The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco. And that was the story. It was about basically Aristotle's use of humor, his discussion of humor, in a book which really no longer exists, but which is reputed to have existed.
So how did he work in comedy and philosophy? I mean, they seem to be maybe not.
Well, he would have treated it as part of the subject of rhetoric, of public speaking. And we don't know exactly what he said, at least I don't, because I haven't seen that work. I'm not sure anyone has seen it in 2,000 years.
Yeah.
But basically, humor is a good way of, especially if you use it right, in the middle of a conversation or the middle of a presentation, if you can break it up with a piece of humor that keeps people looking in that direction, keeps moving them in that direction, it makes you more human, especially if it's humor directed at yourself.
Yeah.
Self-effacing humor, it makes you more attractive to most, certainly modern audiences,
Right.
and helps you make the point. And that's tricky. You have to be a good writer of comedy. You have to have practiced it so that you can deliver clever anecdotes and zingers at the right time.
Well, I've noticed in terms of comedians, that a lot of comedians are also doubling as news journalists these days. So I know that's different than rhetoric, but
I'm tempted to suggest that they've always done that. Many of them are nothing more than comedians. They're mannequins, you know, with nice bone structure. That's mean of me as an old print man. I'm just being mean.
yeah, you're just being funny. Yeah.
But a lot of them, you know, once you're sold on television, once Hollywood knows you, they'll use you if they can. They'll try. You know, I've noticed increasingly journalists appearing in fiction as journalists, saying things that aren't part of the news, but which, in that story's context, are part of the news.
Yeah.
So yeah, they do double duty. I mean, that's how Bill Maher started.
Well, that's what and Jon Stewart, and so one of the things that I've heard that's where people actually go to find out what's really happening, and why a comedian would have a better slant than somebody else. Maybe this goes to your point about rhetoric.
It's just not as painful to hear it in the vein of comedy. I mean, let's face it, do you want to talk about the number of civilians killed in the war in Ukraine? Do you want to know what, you know, Putin's background in the KGB and Directorate A? Do you really want to hear that told you in a solemn voice? You want to hear the numbers? You want to see pictures of the bodies? It's just not.
I think we tried that back in the
hurts.
'60s, and it
Yeah,
didn't
it
work
hurts.
out.
And finally, they stopped showing American dead in Vietnam. They wouldn't show the body bags, which was a blessing. And in fact, that had been the rule for a long time. In World War II, you had people taking pictures of it, but it wasn't as much of a. It's an important part of the story, casualties, but you don't want to just throw it in people's faces.
Yeah.
Now we do it. Now, how can real life, you know, compete with an Arnold Schwarzenegger or a Sylvester Stallone film? I mean, a guy walks up on the stage and slaps a comedian, and who hasn't wanted to do that? And then you turn around and look at the movies these guys make, and they're full of violence, full of gunplay, explosions.
Yeah.
We have so inured ourselves to cruel violence, graphic violence, that it's almost senselessly gratuitous to show it on news.
But I grew up on Bugs Bunny cartoons, and there was some senseless violence going on there.
There were lots of studies about this. Back in the 50s, you had Bandura, Ross, and all those people doing those studies. And they found out that if you had violence reported as straight news, it was objectionable. But if you had cartoon animals doing it, it was somehow more amusing, more entertaining. It didn't turn people off. They wouldn't go away from their TV. God forbid they should go away from
Right,
the TV.
yeah. There's an ad coming up.
That's right. And a lot of experiments. Just look up the Bandura. Look up all the studies, all the studies done in World War II, the Radier studies on propaganda and stuff like that.
So if you propagandize with a little pun intended, then it might go over a little better.
Yeah, you know, it makes light of it, which doesn't hurt as much. It's like an anesthetic. It's like putting lidocaine on the surface before you do a little scalpel work.
Yeah, well, one of the things that with comedy, I think, and this is going back to the comedians as news journalists, when you do apply it with a little bit of salve, a little bit of fun, but you get right to that thing. And I think the comedians I like, that's what they do. They sort of cut through to that underlying human condition, if you will, or the underlying what might be construed as the truth. And but they do it, and you find yourself laughing, even though the topic or the subject wasn't really a laughable thing.
It must be difficult for President Zelensky, being a professional comedian before he assumed the presidency of the Ukraine. It must be difficult for him from time to time not to just. It's so horrible. The destruction so vast, so unbelievably cruel.
Yeah.
It's difficult not to slip into some humorous interlude just to numb you, just to salve the pain.
I forgot that he was a a comedian and really, I guess, well liked.
That's how he made him. That's how he became famous.
Yeah, a Ronald Reagan-esque sort of. Although I don't think Reagan was.
He wasn't much of a comedian. Although Bedtime for Bonzo comes very close to.
So, when we think about comedy and the role of comedy in society, I know we like to laugh. We like to laugh to get over the, sort of the things that we were just talking about. Even the daily world, even not just the severe crisis, but even in the daily world. How does comedy help us as a society? I mean, does it allow us to both laugh about something, or?
Yeah, it's certainly a safe place to go. A nice, quiet, safe place to go. The problem with comedy, good comedy, is that it's difficult to write. You have to write and prepare good comedy. Whereas if you're just blowing things up, if you're just shooting people, that doesn't require a script. You don't have to have a writer. You just have to have good cinematographers. And on the news, all you have to do is show pictures of the tanks, the remnants of tanks. You forget that there are probably 3 or 4 men in each one of those tanks that were incinerated when the ATM or whatever it was went off in there.
Go ahead. Have you ever tried writing comedy? Were you ever? Did that ever?
I was a college professor for 38 years. Yes, that was my shtick, so to speak.
You were more impromptu, huh?
No, I wasn't. I have produced pieces of comedy that have been used by comedians, but I never did that with any kind of seriousness.
Yeah.
I'm a remarkably unserious man. I just don't.
I know, but
it's difficult to be serious. In a world so full of violence and mayhem, we in America live in a bubble. We're safe. It's comfy here. We've got air conditioning. We've got food. We complain about the price of the food going up, but you've got plenty of food.
Yeah.
In other parts of the world, that is not the case. We can keep the heat on. In other parts of the world, that is not the case. And so for us, life is a cabaret, so to speak, old chum. and it's easy for us to slip into comedy. Comedy for us is a way of not paying attention to the body count in Ukraine or in Rwanda or, Libya or someplace else,
All
and
the
Afghanistan.
other places, yeah.
God, what a zoo that was.
So then, the more comedy you have, the more likely you are to be in denial that.
That could be. That's an interesting theory. It would be good to test. If people retreat into comedy in order to escape the painful realities of life, and certainly of television news. But many psychiatrists have advocated to people who suffer from depression and anxiety. Well, the first thing they suggest is turn off the television news. Don't watch it anymore.
Yeah, that's.
It'll just make your blood pressure
I've
screwed up.
Been doing a news fast, which when doing some of these podcasts and you kind of need to know what's going on in the world is difficult. But as you're pointing out, I've just found myself when you're totally, I guess, burdening yourself with all the things. And I guess maybe that's where
My theory is that the war in Ukraine will stop when the ratings go down. When we don't get the ratings anymore, when people aren't paying attention, they'll have to pop a nuke just to keep the numbers up.
That's morbidly funny.
Yeah, in a horrible way.
In a horrible way, absolutely.
Well, the Soviet doctrine and the Russian doctrine, military doctrine, was that if you lose conventional war and you have to retreat over land and give it up, you pop a nuke to stop everything, to freeze everything in place, so you can regroup and negotiate.
Yeah, I see. So they think that you're sort of like dropping a bomb on Hiroshima and
that was a very active, forward-looking thing. The Russians would use it as a means of stopping a losing proposition and going into negotiations.
Yeah. Now would be a good time for a joke, I think.
Yeah, it would be.
I wish I had prepared one.
Well, no, that's okay.
Oh, I've got a good one for you. I heard recently.
All right, let's hear it.
What's the difference between a conspiracy theory and the truth?
I don't know.
About 6 months.
Yeah. Yes. We do seem to live in that time.
Yeah, and I guess being able to laugh about it too. I mean, as you mentioned, if we were really in dire straits and this not even this sort of just being able to come in and talk and even worried about where our next meal was going to come from, might be a little harder to laugh. But I would suppose they still have things they laugh about. I mean, maybe that's...
I'm sure there's laughter in the ruins of Kiev. What happens when Putin and the Russians decide not to sell any more natural gas or oil to Germany? We can't supply them with it. We've turned all ours off.
Right.
So when they get cold in the winter, when they can't drive anymore, when they can't fly, or they're going to have to make some decisions about survival.
Yeah.
The Russians have nuclear weapons. The Germans don't. So guess who wins?
But they have us.
Yeah.
Or the rest of NATO.
It seems unlikely that America would go to nuclear war over an energy crisis in Europe.
Yeah.
Besides, we have thought, our whole premise in all of this has been that Russia needs the foreign cash more than they need to thumb their nose at us. But it'll be interesting. It's going to be an interesting and dynamic time, as the Chinese say. May you live in interesting times as a curse. Well, we're living in interesting times.
Here we are, yeah. So let me ask you one of the common questions I do is, so what's freedom of speech? How do you, and I know it sounds like I'm changing direction.
No. It certainly ends when you walk up on stage and slap a comedian on live television. It goes beyond free speech and goes into assault. But there's no question that comedians assault public figures all the time. And because they're public figures, they have no protection against it. They've sought the acclaim. But freedom of speech is an important component of the American experiment, and we are an experiment.
Yeah. And what do you mean by that, just so I can make sure I understand?
Well, if, for example, in Russia you make fun of Putin, you're probably going to get a bullet or a trip to the Gulag.
All expenses paid?
All expenses paid. One-way trip. But in America, if you make fun of President Biden or President Trump, it's great fun.
But don't make fun of somebody's wife or...
Well, she's an actress. She's asked for that claim. That was a bad joke told at the expense of someone who didn't have a microphone to speak back. And so her husband acted out and did something that was not well considered, and has cost him a very great deal of money and prestige. And it has cost the comedian too. Yeah. So it was a lose-lose scenario.
It didn't seem like on the surface that it was bad joke, yes, but was it that bad?
I didn't see it. I never watched the Oscars.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the next day you couldn't avoid seeing outtakes of the full-handed slap.
Right. I saw the joke. I saw him tell the joke, and I just wonder if we're getting to the point where you have to. There's going to be off limits, or you have to. Maybe being considerate's a nice thing. Maybe it is about us being more considerate of one another. But
it's just a question of your sense of good taste and the appropriateness of the scene. And the comedian in this case didn't think through the implications of his joke or where he was or how it would be received. And that's his fault. Yeah, humor, America's changing so fast. Everything is changing so fast, mercurially so. And it's going to take a while for America to, and the rest of the world, to learn how to use the technology of communication in tasteful and effective ways. But there's no way you can stop bad taste without sacrificing
There's no
something else.
no cure for bad taste.
So
as they say.
people have to learn to do, and we've never learned to do this, but we should learn to do this, is change the channel or turn the TV off.
Yeah, there's an
That
idea.
would certainly send a message to very powerful people.
Even turn the
right
cell
quick.
phone off a bit.
Yeah.
I think there's I know in my lifetime and yours too that having a TV in the house was a big deal. If you had a TV, you were but now you've got a TV on your literally in your pocket, and not just a TV, but a telephone and all those communication devices and rolled into one, and immediate access to all the things. It seems a bit distracting.
It is, with the technology comes the trap, right? It's entertaining, it's light, airy, but it can also be serious, but it's always there. So you can always turn to your cell phone or your television or your radio for surcease. It will numb you, it will keep you happy. It's really quite despicable. And so if you want to have a freedom of speech, you can't shout fire in a crowded theater, although I'm not sure if anybody did that, they would be sued under those terms.
Yeah.
You just have to hope that people, and of course it's a foolish hope because they can't help themselves, won't do anything exceptionally, grotesquely wrong. And if they do, you turn the TV off. You punish the advertisers, and I assure you the word will get very quickly, within a week, hell will rain down on these people because that's everything about TV is about money.
Yeah, and not just TV. Social media is the same, and in some ways you're talking about a form of boycott, really, or what I would consider boycott in the olden days when you used to just
Well,
we're not going to spend our money or our time in social media.
That's one of the things that fascinates me, because it seems to me that when you have it on your cell phone or when it's on the internet, it's so tempting.
Yeah.
And you're in the privacy of your own room, and it's safe to dabble in these things.
Yeah.
You wouldn't in public be seen watching this, but it's okay to sort of look at it through the safe when the lights are off and you're in your room. You can see all these strange things. Maybe funny, maybe not, but it's so easy. We make it so easy for people to exercise bad taste.
Yeah, indeed. And the thing is that the way that this system in particular, and even television now, these, your cable box is not just a one-way, street. They're getting information, about what you're, watching there too. And where the marketers are really, and I know this because this has been my recent research, and they are watching everything we do, partly because they want to make it more personal, but also because they want to find those, let's call them the triggers or the
Hot
nudges.
Years ago, 15 years ago, L.L. Bean had this experience. It's a story that their marketing vice presidents like to talk about. They had a phone system. They'd send out catalogs, and there was a phone number in there. This was before the internet was a big deal. And people would look at the catalog, and they would see things they wanted, and they would make the call, and they would give you the code number, and you would expect to get it in the mail. Then they started really adding lots of databases, developing databases on this. And the story is one woman called up to the Eddie Bauer hotline, or LL Bean hotline, whichever one it was, and said, I would like this frock on page 14, the code number, and I would like it in size M, medium. And the woman working for LL Bean on the other end said, Well, Miss So-and-so, I see that you have ordered that size before and often returned it for an L. Are you sure? And the woman customer was shocked and somewhat horrified
Yeah.
that they would know this about her and throw it back in her face. Now, of course, we just expect them to know all those things.
Absolutely.
They'll to advise you, to counsel you as you surf through their catalog or their website.
Are you sure you want the green shirt? Because I know you like the blue one better.
You return green, you know, and you'd much prefer the paisley one. But that's pretty much where we are now.
And they feed us the content, and not just the catalogs or the obvious stuff, but even going back to and you probably experience this if you spend any time on like YouTube, let's say, where you like a specific brand of comedy. You just keep getting that, and it's sort of one of the things that they talk about in the literature is you sort of get in a mode, and it's hard to break out of that because you don't get a lot of choices outside of that mode.
You get trapped by your own foibles.
Yeah.
Your own weaknesses and your own silliness winds up becoming your environment.
Yeah.
It's kind of like hell.
It
But
kind of is.
yeah, it's the technology is getting away from us, and that's why everyone is concerned about the databases and the, mining information from people. And here, just look at this. Go to this page, and we'll show you a dancing cat and an advertisement for cars.
Right. Because we know you're in the market for one, because we know you've been looking at the
Yeah, you've been to the sites. We know
used
all
car.
about that.
Yeah.
Well, I do that from time to time just for the heck of it. I'll look at car ads, build and customize your own little car.
Yeah.
Build your own little Porsche, which I ain't gonna buy.
What happened to the Bentley?
I know. I want that Bentley. I keep reminding.
That's what students are for, right?
I keep haranguing my former students. If you all just chipped in a quarter apiece, by now I've got thousands of these people.
Right.
A quarter apiece, and we could probably get me a used Bentley.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
Think about someone but yours. Think about Russ.
The careers
What about
that you
Barclay?
made for these, that you allowed them to have the
All that I
knowledge.
did for you, all the donuts, all the wasted calories and poison that I fed you. Don't I deserve a Bentley? I'll take you on a ride. I'll come to campus, and we can all take rides and go
Like
around
the Stanley
campus.
Cup.
Exactly.
Yeah, everybody can have their turn. And,
That's right.
yeah.
You
So,
can smell the rich Corinthian leather.
so have you heard much about the Elvis Shrine? It's still
The last I heard, it was
taking
still in Judy's office. I don't know whether she has disposed of it or grown weary of filling it, which was a cost.
but it's still there to serve
so.
students.
So I should go buy a bunch of stuff and take it to her office and supply her with more stuff. That was fun to have that shrine there because students would come in there, faculty would come in there.
Absolutely.
Oh, I just want this Butterfinger, And you could, while you had them there, you could, why don't you write this piece, that you're talking about? Why don't you write that for the Campus Times? Why don't you go down there and pitch that idea to Jeannie? And sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't.
Yeah. Well, being able to to have something that like that, the students, because probably if they remember much about you, I'm sure that Elvis, because I know you worked Elvis into some of your
yes.
tests even and extra
Yes.
credit things. So
One of my tropes was Elvis is the king of rock and roll. True or true? You couldn't get that wrong.
that was hard to get extra credit
Although
on
I
that.
had a student get that wrong. I had a National Merit Scholar at Quinnipiac University in Connecticut. Cross out the T's, write F, circle. Please excuse me.
What you're saying is accurate from the standpoint that I don't think it's been done quite to this extent before. I don't think anybody's been able. I mean, I think there's been freedom of speech throughout history as long as you were speeching the right speech.
As long as you were prepared to accept the consequences.
No, yeah.
Well, freedom means you're free to do stupid things, free to do bad things.
Yeah.
It works both ways.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I assume the courts will figure this out. We'll run it through the courts, and people will get sued.
And then it gets complicated. Well, how do you think from a common man, an everyday person on the street standpoint, where does it go? I mean, are we free to say those, have those jokes that, I mean, we could name any number of physical traits that jokes are made about, or actions that people, and make fun of them just as a common man, or what? Do we get to the point where if I make a certain type of joke, that if somebody gets offended by it, that
if you violate the dicta of woke culture, you will be beset upon right away. We have a very very active group of people who want to chastise you if ever you say something which violates their extraordinarily progressive, in their point of view, regressive in my point of view, progressive norms. You can't say anything about LB and G. You can't make any, never, don't say gay, that sort of thing. Don't say anything that offends them, or you will be pilloried.
And so they're not waiting on the laws, as it were. They're just taking you straight to the court of public opinion.
They have the court of public opinion, and they have the court of the media. And let's face it, the media are largely Manhattan. They're heavily influenced by the New York media and the big city media, Los Angeles. And they're quite left of center. They will tend to support progressive values.
Yeah.
So if you cross them, even if you're Bill Maher.
Well, I'd heard him complaining that, according to, I guess, former media friends, he's quite the conservative these days. He tends to deny that he hasn't changed at all. But
it's tough. If you're going to walk in the landscape of politics and opinion, it's very difficult not to infuriate a large number of people. You would like to think that people will simply not watch him anymore if they get infuriated.
all right.
But that's not the way it works, because his opponents, the people who want to punish him, are going to make sure that it's on every show. He's going to get covered for it. On a slow news day, he becomes the story.
Yeah.
And
They're just piling on as they
they'll just make him a new whipping boy
now
for a while.
Yeah, and until a new war comes along, or you're coming at this though from public relations. That's your background. So you understand public opinion and how that is used
To the extent
and swayed.
that anyone understands it. Yes. The dark side of this is what the journalists think of as manipulating public opinion, sort of tricking people or seducing people into the dark side, which is public relations. That, of course, is silly. But it's common.
Yeah.
It's arguable which is more loathed by the American people, lawyers or public relations people.
Yeah.
They all are sort of considered. And Edward Bernays, the father of modern public relations, tried very hard to make it a licensed profession. But of course, the First Amendment forbids that, frustrated it.
Now, was he a psychologist, or
No,
am I
he
thinking
was-
about someone else?
No, that was there's a lot of psychologists who've gotten into public relations. You're probably thinking of Rogers, the famous media theorist.
Okay.
But Bernays was, he worked for Roosevelt. He worked for Hoover. He worked for World War I, sold bonds. He was an extremely skilled manipulator of public opinion.
Yeah. And I don't know why, but Dr. Seuss, speaking of propaganda, Dr. Seuss was big player in World War II, if I remember, or I think that was right.
I don't know
One
about
of
that.
the worlds, yeah. I think he put out some propaganda pieces. It had to be World War II because of his ethnicity and
His
what was
age.
going on in that part
I'm
of
not
the world.
familiar with that.
Yeah,
I'll
I
have to look into that.
Yeah, I can't remember any of the specifics, but I remember generally that was part of his contribution was, and by then he was pretty well known, I believe. So the comedy, you sort of touched on comedy and politics, democracy, and we have to be able to make fun of our leaders to some degree. I mean, if they're untouchable, which I'm not sure in Russia that they can do that, but doesn't it help to like bring them to a little bit more humanity, like they're human just like we do? So what
That's
role
one of the
does
great parts of
comedy
the
play?
American experiment is that we can make fun of our leaders. We can hold them up to some mockery. The deal is, if you get to be president of the United States, you get all the money, all the power, all the glory, and the nice house, we get to make fun of you. Isn't that fair? Seems fair to me.
It seems like
Some of them are thinner skinned than others.
that's
Our
probably
previous
the issue.
president was very susceptible to being made fun of.
And do you think that was I guess my siblings would say that I used to like to pick on them for just to see if I could get a rise out of them and see if they would blow up. Was this, is that sort of the same? Let's see what if we just if we can push them the right way.
Yeah. Well, I honestly believe that President Trump was mentally ill. I think there was something seriously wrong. And I don't think it's getting better. And the fact that he still retains such a large following, what appears to be a large following, disturbs me very much about a lack of humor in the American populace. Things become sacred. We're not going to wear masks because that would be giving in to these scientific elites up in New York that are telling us what to do. And that's not something that our president would admire. We're not going to take these vaccines because, once again, science is trying to drive it down our throats. And that's wrong. And there's an argument to be made for that. I don't think a good one, but it's been made plenty of times. You either believe in the scientific process and what science has produced for us over the past 100 years, or you don't. You think it's a conspiracy to oust your president.
We'll just wait 6 months.
Yeah. See what happens. Have some Tide Pods. But he's made himself so easy to make fun of.
Well, and some might claim that what's the old saying? Any press is good press. As long as they're still talking about me, I'm still important.
That's maybe what he thinks. I don't know what he thinks. But yes, he's in the front and center.
Which may be a
of the
good
time.
thing that you're not able to get inside somebody's head like that.
Yeah. But he's some of the things he's said and done are funny because they're so outrageous.
Right.
I mean, when you support Vladimir Putin for attacking Ukraine, which he's had to walk back, and when President Biden accuses him of being some Asiatic Tartar, which he's had to walk back. But that's that. You get to say it first and get the publicity for that. You get your point, then it's not what I meant. I didn't mean he was a murdering savage. I mean, he's just, mean.
Well, it sounds maybe even like good PR, right? I mean, maybe not good as in positive light, but he's able to say it, able to get, what he wants to say. Maybe his supporters feel, okay. But then
Well, when the President of the United States says something like that, it means something.
Yeah.
It may make the NATO countries very happy to hear him say what they're all thinking. It may upset Vlad. But if you upset Vlad too much, he'll have another press release saying, we can use nuclear weapons. That's his standard thing, Don't forget, we have nuclear weapons. We're a gas station with nuclear weapons.
Don't make me get up.
Yeah, don't make me
come
do
over
that.
there. So do you think that anything, we're talking about freedom of speech and public figures and the fact that you're put yourself out there as whether it's a political leader or even a star of some sort, famous for whatever reason, and people are going to make fun of you.
Sure.
And they make fun of me, and I'm not anybody, so I make fun of myself.
I'm sure the students had horrible things to say about us. I'm sure they enjoyed mocking us to no end.
May still do some cases. But should anything be off limits? I mean, and you mentioned just having good taste, but is there any subject that maybe we shouldn't?
There are many I would suggest we shouldn't, but that's not the First Amendment. The First Amendment, unless you're actually inflicting damage or encouraging people to do something violent to each other, beyond speech, you really don't want to have any restraints. Because the American Revolution wasn't started by people who parsed their words and thought about what they were writing.
Yeah.
You couldn't ask Tom Paine to back off his very lyrical prose. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot. You get writing like that every day. Or the Moskva is attacking the ocean bottom without, those sorts of things. Or the Lego box that has just a picture of a blue ocean on it. The Moskva.
So what about maybe for guidance, maybe we should have a Carlin's list for comedy topics. You can say them, but you're going to get bleeped.
Well, if you make fun of Muhammad, blessings and peace be upon him, or the Muslim religion, risk your life. Because their adherents, some of them, are going to come and burn you alive.
So as you mentioned earlier, you can say whatever you want to.
If you're willing to accept the consequences.
Yeah.
Islam is a wonderful religion. I've read the Quran. I don't. The people who are blowing people up in the name of the Quran are demented, in my view. But nobody cares my view about religion.
Well, every once in a while, even the Europeans decided to go into the Middle East and have their say, if you will. So
yes, in about 1835. That's when the Western colonization of the Middle East and North Africa began. That's when France annexes Algeria. Up until that time, the people in the Middle East had no word for the Crusades. They didn't. It wasn't as important to them as it became in the West. Al-Harub al-Salabiyya, the Wars of the Crosses.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't come up with a word like Crusades until after it became very popular in the Western press and books in the 1830s. And that was the kickoff for the colonization. The French and, Lebanon and Syria, the Germans and Cameroon and, those places.
Well, and I know this gets us off topic a little bit, but there are some who say that's sort of where we're at with Ukraine. It's a resource. I know that's a little bit more political from a borders standpoint. Where are the borders? But there's some who see Ukraine as very heavy in natural resources and a thing that would be better.
Wheat. It's the breadbasket of Europe. The first place that Hitler assaulted through was the Ukraine to get a hold of that wheat.
Well, it's unfortunate for the people that live there, whatever the.
But no matter how brutal and cruel history is, there's always a lot of good jokes around it. Think of all the Hitler jokes. Think
True.
of all the, all the cartoons and comic books that people produced to demean and belittle him. I'm sure they did the same with us, but nobody seems to have paid any attention to those.
Right. The stick figures of, I guess, our caricature up in front of the class saying something that was probably stupid. I mean, I'm not.
Well, it's worth a try.
Yeah.
Again, in a capitalist economy, does it make money? Are people willing to buy it? Are they willing to attend that television program? Are they willing to read those magazines? Because if they are, you're going to get more of it.
Yeah.
Money talks.
It does indeed.
Morality doesn't.
Yeah, that's tough to swallow, literally.
Yeah. I've had my vaccinations and my booster, and I'm thinking about a second booster, but I'm bored. And I'm dying anyway. So
why not? It'd get you another.
just, like I said, I'll curl up in the corner.
I think the thing that there, and it's, you make the science argument, but or that people want to deny science, but there wasn't any real discussion. It was either I'm right and you're wrong from either side and from all sides, and that reason sort of and rational sort of conversations, things that I guess I just took for granted in life. All of a sudden, the rules have changed.
Yeah.
And you don't agree with everything that I think, and same. And
Well, I would for a price.
Well, there's the problem. I don't have. There's no price that I have to pay. So
Well,
I
again,
took a vow of poverty to be a
President,
professor.
yes, you do, don't you? We should actually have little days every month where we could sit outside with a cup and have our students drop quarters.
Alms,
Yeah, alms for the poor. That would have been funny.
And I guess that's really because you asked a little bit about why I'm doing this, and why I'm doing this is because I want to have civil, I guess, polite, really caring, reasonable conversations, and be able
Well,
to.
you've come to the wrong place here. I'm sure we've said something today that'll upset somebody, inflame somebody, and you'll get hate mail. Who is that?
I'm glad I don't
anti-Trump?
read my mail.
Yeah. I don't get email anymore. Nobody cares.
So now, you're the Trump hater, and why would you have them on?
You're looking at one of the few people, one of the about 900 people in Kentucky who voted for Kanye. Oh, yeah.
Did he get 900 votes?
Oh, yeah, something like that.
Wow, well, that's a
He was
start.
on the ballot, and I didn't care for either of the candidates in the other parties, so why not? How many opportunities am I going to have to vote for a rap star?
And you didn't get a lot of pushback for going third party because that
Nobody
wasted your
knew, except you and now you. I mean, I
the two or three other people now, right?
Kanye, that's, and the Kardashians. I just don't see why I wouldn't do that. Life is short. Enjoy Kanye while you can.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure he'll be coming out with a new album, so you can have that.
How hard can the job be? That was Kinky Friedman's line when he was running for the governor of Texas.
How hard can
Vote Kinky. How hard can it be?
Well, what was the movie about Idiocracy? Is that the one where the wrestler becomes president and everything's just... and I think they had toilets in their easy chairs, so they...
Yeah, makes life easy in every way. Very eliminative. It's not that, when you think about it, it's not that far. In the Trump administration, it was almost to the point of professional wrestling. It was almost, I'm going to throw Biden into the turnbuckle, and I'm going to do the eagle claw on him, and that's.
Well, you are a wrestling fan,
Well, I was.
You was.
I learned more Spanish sitting on the upper row of the Zembo Mosque in Harrisburg, watching Haystacks Calhoun and Bruno Sammartino go at it back in the days when wrestling was really wrestling. And I learned more Spanish from all the Puerto Rican guys up there.
Can you repeat any of the things you learned?
No, what little I learned was very offensive. But it was delightful to look down there and see these little old ladies sitting ringside, and guys in suits sitting ringside at this farce. And the little old ladies were railing and screaming, and the police had to keep them away because there were a number of cases where a little old lady had a hat needle and go up there and jab Bruno in the rump.
Good times, those, huh?
Yes, that was in the media. It was truly interactive.
Well, do you have anything else that you want to add? Usually I end with how technology and artificial intelligence are affecting comedy, and
I just wonder how long it'll be before comedians have their copy written for them by an AI. This is an acceptable joke, that's unacceptable. This would be funnier if you change this wording here and here. That's something which is conceivable, I suppose. But the nice thing about the First Amendment is you got people, and there's some great comedians out there now. You've got people who will push the boundaries, and no AI is going to do that. The programmers aren't going to do that.
And I don't know. I feel like I know. I guess for me, there's comics that really, I love the way what they say. It's got a lot of depth to it. Presentation is just right for me, and so I would hope that I would be able to distinguish. I think what I hear you saying is that AI might it'll make you safe but middle of the road.
Yeah, it would be very sterile.
Yeah.
Very sterile. But,
Well, I'm hearing that comedians aren't wanting to come to college campuses. And, I mean, I could see that. And the reason is because there are so many of that Carlin's list of
so
topics,
many hot button issues.
that
The students will start shrieking at them,
Yeah.
you racist, homophobic, sexist, pick a slur, anti-American, Trump-hating, Biden-loving pinko.
Yeah, that's. I mean,
Yeah,
I can understand that. I wouldn't.
I mean, the cancel culture, which is the most offensive thing I can think of. You're just canceling people because you don't want to hear their routines. You don't want to hear them speak. That is the antithesis of the university.
Well, then you're canceling from other people hearing them.
Sure.
So,
It is the antithesis of the university. We know what it's Bolshevik. It's something that the Communist Party would have done. We know what you should hear. We know what you should think.
Yeah.
You're not going to listen to this. You're going to hear this. Only this is approved.
That is very hard line, but it's seemingly bubbled up to the masses. Or I mean, how do you get a group? And I know this is way off topic, but how does a group form that sort of serious? As you're pointing out, this canceling. I mean, that takes a group effort that are all on the same page, that are all willing to put in the effort and go after somebody and cancel them, almost striking them from history.
There's a drumbeat. There's a drumbeat from the media and from the university campuses of this kind of this is forbidden. This is kinjuru, right? And it is very Bolshevik, very revolutionary. But in this country, as has been demonstrated more than once, you can recreate the Nazi Party. You can find somebody, students, who will follow the dicta if you just conceal it a little bit, don't have the swastika, don't talk about Nazis.
It's all about the messaging, how you do it.
As a friend of mine who survived, an acquaintance of mine, I guess he was a friend, who survived the camps, Bergen-Belsen, he said, you could always find people to run the trains to Dachau. They're always there. They're there, you just have to find them.
And motivate them.
Yeah. Or pay them.
Or pay them, which
That's
is
another reason a
great
lot of the
motivator.
major comics won't come to college campuses. College campuses don't have the money.
Well, that's probably, there's that.
You know, Lewis isn't going to come here. We can't afford him.
I thought he was canceled.
No, he's raking it in.
He's
He's just raking it in.
I think they tried for a minute or two.
He's lost a lot of weight.
Has he?
I wonder if he's got what I've got.
Well, a good sense of humor.
Yeah,
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it, Russ.
it's a great pleasure and very kind of you to invite me down here. I hadn't been back to campus in a long time, and I haven't had a chance to see the campus. I'll go there before we go to Wings and Rings. Is that the place you recommend?
You'll have to bleep that. They're not an official.
Oh, they're
That
not
place,
advertisers.
the place that has buffalo wings and onion rings.
Yeah, the place
Nearby.
The Place du Lard.
Well, thank you, and
Thank you.
Hope to see you again.
Well, you know where to find me. For now.
For now.